Today I sat down with Elaine Pofeldt. Elaine has written a book called The $1 Million One-Person Business, where she has done a study on literally, I think, north of 100 people who have built a multi-million-dollar business on the back of being a solo owner-operator, leveraging contractors, of course, but really they're the main breadwinner, the main source driving the business. And she writes for Forbes. She has a very interesting journey and experience, really having spoken to more entrepreneurs, I would say, than most people in the world, really getting into the crux of it. So she talks a lot about the things that she's found to be interesting and a little bit about the book. I've read it and found some really interesting insights, and makes me question, why would you build such a big business when you can have such great success as a solopreneur? But, we all pick our battles and our journeys. So enjoy the episode. She's awesome. I'd highly encourage you to get the book and go from there, guys. Welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I talk to world-class professionals on what it takes to scale successful businesses. I dive deep asking questions to people who are running unicorn businesses, to raising funds, to buying businesses, mergers and acquisitions, IP and patent law, what is to manage performance management. I mean, the list goes on. The idea really is, how do I create knowledge and learning for you guys listening in? And of course, myself, getting the floor with people who I, in many cases, would never dream to share a room with. Before we jump into the episode, I've got to give a special thank you to our sponsors. Firstly, over at Global Wide Advisors, a leading digital consumer products investment bank focused on optimizing the sales process. An incredible team, always happy to pick up the phone and educate you or anyone about the sales process and what you should really consider, and can obviously help take you to market or even acquire businesses. I ring them for just about everything these days. Us over at Multiply Me, we are the end-to-end executive search and HR function into the Philippines, helping find better talent and onboarding them effectively. And last but not least, Escala, our management consultancy focused on process improvement, where we help build better systems for your business. That's all the ads you're going to get from me, ladies and gentlemen. The rest is all about learning. I hope you really enjoy and get as much out of these sessions as I do, sitting face to face with some of the world-renowned leaders in their respective fields, asking them the tough questions that they're not often asked. Elaine, welcome to an episode of Successful Scales.
Thank you so much, Yoni. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to have you on and to dive into a topic that you are literally probably the foremost expert of in the world, given that you've written a book on the topic. And before I butcher anything and get everything wrong, I'd love for you to tell me, and those more specifically living at home and listening, a little bit about yourself, and then obviously we can jump into the book. But let's hear about you first.
Sure. I thought you were going to ask me how to pronounce my name. That's always the first question.
And then, how do you pronounce your name?
It's Elaine Pofeldt, in case you're wondering. That's the Long Island pronunciation of it. In any case, you wanted to know how I got into writing it, a little bit about my background. I'm a journalist. I've been writing about entrepreneurship for a long time. I was a senior editor at Fortune Small Business magazine. And then I went freelance and became a freelance entrepreneur in 2007. And I've run my business since then. And it's evolved. I've been a journalist for a long time, but over time, I also became a book author. And I do ghostwriting of books for some of my clients and some content marketing. So I've experienced what a lot of the listeners to this show are living every day, really, for the past X number of years. While raising a family, I live in New Jersey with my husband, and we're right outside of New York City, coping with the cost of living here. And so I understand the realities that people are facing, in terms of going after their dreams, but also having to pay the bills. And that was what interested me in these $1 million one-person businesses. I'm a blogger for Forbes, and a few years back, I was looking for my fifth blog of the month. I was running dry on ideas, and I started Googling around, and I came across what are called the non-employer statistics. They have different names in different countries, but in the US, it means businesses with no payroll. So they may have one person working in them. Most of them are just one person. Sometimes they have a couple, or you'll have a bunch of friends who started a startup that really hasn't scaled yet and started hiring. But basically, that's what unites them. They have no payroll. And I noticed that a growing number of them were getting to the category of 1 to 2.5 million in revenue. There were a handful going above that, but really that was the one that was growing. And I wrote a post looking at that trend and some of the categories of businesses that people were in getting to that level. And I was really curious about it myself because I knew a lot of other freelancers, and I knew they weren't making $1 million in revenue a year. So once I posted that, I didn't have any information on who they were. People started writing to me. It got a lot of page views, something like 200,000 page views. And people said, this was a cliffhanger, Elaine. We really need to know what they're doing. So can you tell us who they are? And I really couldn't, because the Census Bureau will not tell you that. Those surveys are confidential. So I wrote to the readers of Forbes. I did a series of looks at different niches, like consulting, for instance. And I said, if you're one of these entrepreneurs, please write to me. People are really curious about what you're doing. And this whole thing moved at a glacial pace. Over the course of a year, I heard from 5. And by about a year later, I wrote a post looking at these entrepreneurs, and they were people like Alan Walton, who founded Spy Guy, an online spy camera store, meaning like those nanny cameras to make sure someone isn't abusing your grandmother, that type of thing. There's the babysitting company. Rachel Charlupsky founded it, and she started it as a college student. And she ran it at the time on her BlackBerry, managing 2,500 different babysitters in all these different markets. I don't even, to this day, she's still in business, and I have no idea how she manages all of this. She's still a solo. Dan Mezaritsky was another one. He's a fitness trainer, and he created a fitness company where he licenses out the brand. It's called Fitness on the Go, and it's a Toronto company. And he provides the back end to these trainers. Like, he'll help them get business. He gives them leads. They have a massive CRM that they can tap into for storing the customers' workouts and that sort of thing, and so on. And that post went more viral than really anything that I've written in my career. And I started hearing from more of those entrepreneurs. So every time I heard from one, as long as it was a legitimate business, I would write about it. And then over a couple of years, a literary agent noticed them. And she wrote to me and she said, I noticed there's a lot of reader interest in this topic. Would you be interested in writing a book? And by this point, yes, I was. And I had enough material to write it as well. And so that's what brought us together today.
Yeah, I mean, super fascinating topic, and kudos to you for having sort of the follow through to wait, because like you said, it moved at spoken like a writer, a glacial pace. I mean, it's so eloquently put, but you stuck the course, and you've really, I don't know how many entrepreneurs you've spoken to who have one person, $1 million businesses. You probably do.
I do know. I think at this point, it's about 70, give or take. They're not all one person. Sometimes people are very literal. And if there's somebody in the book that was 2 people, they feel like, this isn't sticking with the subject matter. But the truth is, that's how they're grouped by the Census Bureau. And so I look at it really through the lens of the non-employer business. And some of them are not static too. Like when I updated the book, it just came back out again this year. Some of them decided they love being a one-person business. One of the entrepreneurs, Matt Friel, has a business where he sells vintage video games, and he built it to about 3 million in revenue. It was an eBay store, then he went off of eBay. He likes having a one-person business. He doesn't want any more than that, on his mind. And then some of the other ones like Brooklinen. It was a husband and wife couple. They sell direct to consumer sheets. They raise venture capital. They scale. They're a traditional scale up. Another one is Birch Benders, was a pancake mix company, a healthy pancake mix company. When I met them, it was a husband and wife couple. But then they wanted to scale the traditional way. And I say they're all part of a continuum. I'm excited about entrepreneurship in general, and nobody should be locked into a size of business just for the sake of it. It makes no, it's not a religion. It's just a means to running the business. So whatever works for you is really the right size that it should be.
Again, very, very well put there. And I think, when I'm sitting here listening and, the topic itself, it has a lot of appeal. I mean, for anyone who's reading in and looking for insights, and you give a lot of those insights in the book. I remember reading just before we got on, you literally outlined, I think, 10 of the different verticals or industries that these come from coaching to D2C, manufacturing, e-commerce businesses. I mean, there was a whole list. You guys have to read the book to really see all the details here. But obviously, for anyone out there, especially like trying to take that entrepreneurial leap and dive into it, like obviously you want to know that you can make it work and not have to have so many moving parts and pieces. And with having personnel and having staff and having everything that goes with that, it creates additional complexity. So I wholeheartedly understand and can see the appeal. And, like I was saying to you, I think the first time we connected, for a lot of people who I speak to, when I tell them we grew from 4 to 130 in about 12 months in terms of personnel, people who have run big businesses before, they say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you, because it's a very different reality, right? It's a very different reality. If you can leverage and build, if you could be a one person business, but you could leverage agencies, suppliers, manufacturers. I mean, that's how a lot of these e-commerce entrepreneurs are actually making it work, right? It's that they don't own the infrastructure. They're not delivering on every aspect of the supply chain and logistics. They're not physically building their own 3PL. They are leveraging other infrastructure. So, I mean, I have tons of questions for you, but I guess the first question I have is, like, when people are finding your book or reading your columns, like, what's the typical sentiment when you're having these conversations with those on the follow-up? Like, what are they searching for, and what has been the appeal? Is that sort of aligned with it?
I think most people who run one person businesses want to accomplish more with them. It's hard to just be a solo. It really is. There isn't the support system in society. A lot of times you're outside of the health insurance system to some extent, depending on the country that you're in. And you might not be part of the unemployment system. So there's really no safety net. So you have to create your own safety net. And the way to do that is really by generating more profits, so that you can put money aside, that you can buy the benefits that you might have gotten through a job or through the government, depending on the country, and build a little moat around yourself and your family so that you have stability. I think things are changing a little bit. We saw with this latest COVID-related recession that a lot of the governments did step up and recognize that freelancers are people too, and they deserve help when other people are getting help and that sort of thing. But you're still largely on your own when you make the choice to be an entrepreneur. So I think a lot of them, that's really the issue. They need more income, more profits, not necessarily to be the richest person in the world. I don't think that most of them aspire to that, but they want to be comfortable. They want to know if they have kids, they can send them to college. If they want to own a home, they can own a home, that sort of thing. The things that you would get from a senior level corporate job, but on their own terms.
And that makes a lot of sense to me as someone trying to go through this journey myself as well. There's not necessarily that reality or that grass is always greener. Like, I want to be my own boss. I want to run my own company. I want to make the decisions, when you quickly realize that it's 20 past 9 on a Monday night and you're on a call doing what you love, but still always somewhat accountable to the business, right? So it's a totally different reality that you live in. There's pros and cons that exist, but yeah, definitely something to consider. What's been like the most obscure industry vertical or space that you've seen that has yielded such a great ROI?
Oh, there's so many obscure ones, but that's one of the really interesting things. I mean, you had alluded to the categories, and what I'll say is that major categories for the $1 million one person businesses are professional services, personal services, like say a nutritionist who becomes an Instagram influencer, informational marketing, which is related to that, real estate. There are people that are acquiring real estate. Manufacturing is a really interesting one now because it's so easy. Like you were talking about outsourcing, that makes it accessible to all. And e-commerce, of course, is a really huge one, although very competitive right now. But within them, there are little niches that people can own. And one of the new case studies in the book is a company called Ocean Audit, and the founder, Steve Ferreira, is in a business that seems kind of dry. What he does is he audits the bills that a shipping company would send to a store that was ordering a big shipment of, say, shirts overseas, maybe J.C. Penney or somebody like that. And he finds that the bills are actually public documents, and he searches them for errors because the scale of the errors is so big. And maybe he finds a $250,000 or $500,000 error. And then he goes to the CFO of the retailer and says, I've discovered this error. It won't cost you anything to hire me, but I get a 50% commission and I'll collect it for you. He added software to the equation a few years into the business, and it's become very efficient. He's at about $2 million as a one-man business. And I thought that's a really interesting niche. And he's spoken at a few live events that I've had about the book. And he talked about how he brings a lot of flair to the business. When he presents the error, there's a little drama to the presentation. He makes it fun for himself. And I think he's such a great example of somebody in a seemingly mundane type of corporate job, auditing. It's not that sexy really, but he made it fun and interesting and a tool for wealth building. And he's helping these companies too, and creating value. And it's found money for them. And I would imagine now in this whole era of all the shipping issues that companies are having, it's very welcome.
It's probably it's probably a $4 million plus business today.
It probably is. I haven't talked to him in a few months. I bet it is.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of interesting things to grow it. Like I remember during the height of COVID, he was on LinkedIn a lot, and he's an influencer in the shipping industry. He does a lot of live broadcasts on LinkedIn, and he was reaching out to key stakeholders at the companies that might hire him. And he was getting people like 11 o'clock at night writing back to him because everybody was looking at, okay, what do we do with this company next? We need a solution. Things are frozen right now. And making himself very useful. And he won a lot of business that way. And I thought, there's just so many lessons to learn from them. That's what I love, is they're really great business people because they're so good at leveraging the resources that one person brings to the table, and they accomplish so much more than the average person does that I think we can all learn from them. I learn from them every single time I talk to them about something that I could do better in my own business. And that's what I try to share, because we're all looking for these hacks and tricks and tools and things that give us more time for all the things that we like to do.
Do you ever sort of look at it from the standpoint of the different phases of the business? Obviously, you have, you have one person, $1 million businesses, and between $1 million, 2.5 million. But, I think for everyone, it's very different from day one versus day, 365 or 5,000. Are there any sort of consistent lessons that you've found sort of for earlier stage entrepreneurs, or like breaking that barrier to hitting $1 million?
Oh, definitely. I think in the beginning, people are just seeing if it will stick, or they're like, I hate my job, I'm quitting, or I'm going to start a side hustle. And then it starts working. So that's the one phase of traction, really. Then they get it going and they start building it the normal ways. Maybe they get it to like $100,000 and they get it to $200,000 or $300,000. And then at that level, you're kind of topping out in certain fields as to what one person can do. It's maybe if they're like a workaholic, they can get to $400,000 working every weekend, but they're not going to go above that in most fields just as a solo. And so what they start to do is think about how to get things done more efficiently. Maybe they hand off some work to a bookkeeper or an accountant. Usually that's the first type of thing they do, or they get a virtual assistant who does some of the administrative tasks in the business. And then they find that that's working pretty well. So they start thinking more about how can I get even more done outside of myself in the most cost efficient way possible so that the business is profitable, but I have more time to focus on strategy and growing the business. And I'm not answering customer service emails myself at 3:00 in the morning to have 24-hour coverage. And then they'll start getting creative and say, oh, maybe I need a social media agency. Maybe I need someone to buy the Facebook ads instead of doing it myself. Maybe I need to use outsourced warehousing and shipping, like a lot of the Amazon sellers. So I can stick to my knitting and do what I do best, or, be the public face of the business and really the mind behind the business. And I think it's right around that stage where there's a shift into thinking more like an entrepreneur. Even if they stay solo, they're entrepreneurial thinkers and they have a big vision for scaling, like maximizing the resources of the business and maximizing what they can earn from what they put in. And then what happens with some of them is then they go the more traditional route. I noticed that there was an inflection point for a lot of them. And I can't put my finger on the exact moment it happens, but they start to build an even bigger team. Maybe they'll have 40 contractors around the world, or they start to hire a few employees. And I think that's a different phase from the $1 million one-person business who has 5 random contractors and maybe uses outsourced warehousing. There's a shift because you've got to manage a team. And that's actually what in my new book, Tiny Business, Big Money, that's what I looked at, because I did think they had to put more systems in place. They had to think a lot more about people management, people selection, quality control, and other things that maybe wouldn't come up as much with a very small team where you can actually have conversations with every single person on the team whenever you need to.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, and from someone who's sort of going through this process, very personally right at this very moment, I think like that shift, at least in my experience, is that you get to a point where you now bring in great people who can leverage their insights and be the best at what they bring to the table, as opposed to trying to think that you as the entrepreneur can sort of fill those gaps. So, for example, for us, we just hired a chief product officer for our head of technology. And I mean, the insights, the 15-year career she's had coming into the business, I can't even keep up. Like, she is just a force to be reckoned with in what she's going to be able to do. And so I think it's almost at that stage where you start to let go and realize, like, you're not going to be able to be the best at everything. So playing to your strengths and knowing what it is that you uniquely bring and for me, I'm one entrepreneur in, I would say, a sea of entrepreneurial spirit inside of our business today. And I think so when you start to move people into the right seats and they can bring things to the table that you couldn't in your wildest dreams, it sort of unlocks that next layer and that next level. And that's, then I feel to myself, well, shit, when we get there, what is the next, what's the next layer? And it's ever evolving.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something. And actually, you put that very well. I wish I was interviewing you right now, because those are really important points. I think that a lot of these folks are really good at unlocking the talent of the people around them, taking their ego out of the equation and really listening to other people that have a lot of experience in what they need to know. And that's very, very important, because in the early stages of a business, a lot of us are forced to do things the DIY way because we have no resources. We're using our own money. We don't have unlimited money to outsource to 15 contractors or hire an employee. So we have to maybe do our own books, do our own accounting, things that we're maybe not good at, or maybe, maybe we are good at accounting, but we're not good at our marketing or whatever it may be. But then there does come a point where that works against you. If you keep doing it, you will just not have the time you need to work on R&D, to work on, new product or service ideation, to be out there networking with the right kind of people to grow your business, to build relationships in the financial world if you need to raise money to grow the business. And I think that's kind of the art of it, is knowing for yourself when you've gotten to that point where you need to start letting go. And it's hard because it's like your child, and I think there's an instinct to be a control freak about your business, because for a lot of people, it's a form of self-expression. I mean, I really think there are a lot of parallels between entrepreneurs and artists and musicians and creative people. They are creative people. So to let go is hard, but to realize your vision, sometimes you have to. And if you think about it, even a lot of artists have assistants who help them behind the scenes. And that's what these folks realize.
Spot on. And I think just to echo what you said, I mean, I feel like when I'm at, in inverted commas, work, that to me is a happy place for me. And that to me feels like art. It's abstract, high level creative problem solving where there is no end game or end answer. It's how do we continue to add more value and improve? And how do we serve in my case here, how do we serve our clients in a way that's going to actually have huge impact in creating leverage for their businesses? And so it becomes this like incredible perpetual growth opportunity, I'd say, for both, where you help them grow their business and, outsource aspects. So we're working with a number of these $1 million one-person entrepreneurs, helping them to staff their businesses or building consulting practices. And so, yeah, it feels very much like art. But I'd say, and you touched on a really great point just a little bit ago, I think that the ones, the entrepreneurs that can leave their ego at the door and actually get to that position where they're not full of themselves. And, I had an ex-business partner where he used to always tell me, listen, we are the business. You and me, we are the business. And it couldn't have been more counterintuitive to me. And I used to argue with him. I said, you're getting it all wrong. We're not the business. Like, the team is the business. And what we do, we just have to facilitate their opportunity and their growth. So no ego, and actually calling out the other artists in the organization, the other entrepreneurs, the other team members who are actually delivering. If you look after your team, they'll look after you. And that's my firm philosophy. If I always put them first and think how I can support and help them grow and pay them more money and whatever it is they need, I think that becomes sort of for me, that's the secret sauce, realistically.
That's very well put. Yeah, I think you're totally onto something with that, because you're really a conduit and a channel. I always feel like these things, the ideas for a business, appear kind of mysteriously. It's a gift from the universe or wherever, and if you can receive it and you be the conduit, bringing the people together, it really brings big rewards. And like you said, it's kind of an ecosystem, right? The customers that you serve, everybody needs each other. And that's one of the interesting things about writing about one-person businesses. They're never in isolation. There's always a kind of village around the business, in the business and outside of the business. It wouldn't exist if it weren't for people. Sometimes I know there are people that are critics of the gig economy and that sort of thing. And they think it's bad if people are not on payroll and that sort of thing. But I disagree with it, because I think these people are very much part of a community. They're part of the business community. They're part of communities with their customers, and they're not victims. They're choosing it. They like steering their own ship or their own little speedboat, whatever it is. And they wouldn't give it up. they do not feel victimized. I mean, in some instances, there are definitely cases of misclassification and that sort of thing, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who voluntarily start a business and want to do their thing.
Yeah, and to your point about having a village of people around you, there's only like the great equalizer is you've only got 168 hours in your week, right? To do work or, whatever it is you're delivering on. Now, you can't manufacture any more of it. So it's how do you allocate that time effectively to achieve as much as humanly possible to grow the business or whatever it is you're passionate about. So having these contractors, the gig economy, or I mean, my personal favorite is to just outsource to professional operations. So to work with, like you said before, working with a PPC or media agency or a social media agency, like having a business that is single-minded and focused on what it is they deliver and leveraging that expertise, having that cross-pollination across multiple clients, I also think creates a special sort of, and I hate this word, but synergy, I've used it, creates a special sort of synergy realistically where, I look at Escala, for example, our consulting practice, like there'd be very few businesses, I'd argue there's no other business in the world that's seen inside of so many e-commerce operations. We've deployed into probably somewhere between 60 and 70 e-commerce businesses today and doing anywhere from 1 million to 100 million plus in annual revenue. So, it's only because we've had the opportunity to work with so many businesses that are in a similar field and have that sort of direct comparison that we can build a maturity framework and say, right, this is how you build it the best way. We've seen all the different ways. We've done our own independent research and we've now quantified that this actually makes the most sense from an operational perspective. So being a specialist in that, leveraging, another company, hopefully that's doing as good a work, if not better than us. I mean, that's who I want to be working with.
Oh, definitely. It must be so fascinating. You're giving me ideas for the continuation of our interview for Forbes. Some other questions I want to ask you. But yeah, definitely. I think you're so right about that. Affiliating with other people that are doing what you do and may be able to teach you something is so valuable. And it does require you to put your ego aside. But if you can do that and you're really in it to learn and grow as an entrepreneur and to grow the company, it's the only way. You cannot possibly know everything on your own. And that's the valuable lesson I've gotten from all of these folks is they really don't try to do it all on their own. And sometimes they have unpaid teams. It could be family members, et cetera. But they're very open to what the world has to teach them. And that's why they get to 1 million.
Is that sort of a constant trend from the now 70 entrepreneurs who who fit that classification? Would that be a common, like, what are some of the common trends? What's the mindset like? What's the delivery mechanic? Like how are these amazing entrepreneurs thinking on the day-to-day?
Well, they definitely, I think in terms of efficiency and amplifying what one person can do. And they're big students of what other entrepreneurs are doing. So you see a lot of automation down to simple things like their calendar, using Calendly or Schedule Once. You'll see a lot of outsourcing. And it's not only outsourcing shipping, it could be other things. Some of them have outsourced things like doing their back office, like invoicing. Harry Ein, who runs a swag company, makes like t-shirts with a company's name on it. That's what he did within the swag industry. There's a back office provider, and he was able to rent a fractional share of someone's services to do that part of his business. And he's a pure solo, and I think he got to about 3 million in revenue, if memory serves me correctly, by using that approach. And then there's also using contractors is another big one. I mean, they're very big users of contractors for everything that they can. And Angie Raja, she and her husband Colin have started a business called Rim Sports, which sells like colorful boxing and CrossFit gear for women, that sort of thing. She would make lists of what else can I outsource today. She would try to actively take herself out of the equation as a daily exercise.
Amazing.
And I think that's something that's important. It's a consciousness, and that's something in terms of mindset. I'm a big student of yoga. I'm actually going to yoga twice today because there's a special yoga benefit at my yoga school. And there's a consciousness to these entrepreneurs, and they're very intentional about how they run the business, because when you are one person, you can't just be doing things willy-nilly. You've got to be focused in order to have an impact. I mean, you can do them willy-nilly, but then you're not going to be at $1 million. You might not have any revenue. And so that's important. An interesting thing I found in Tiny Business, Big Money, I surveyed the entrepreneurs. Some of them do have small teams of employees, so it's not a pure look at the one-person business. But there were a number that had larger teams of contractors, but were non-employers. Almost all of them exercise. And the top exercise was yoga. And I thought that was kind of interesting too. There is definitely a mindfulness. I'm not saying it's all woo-woo or anything like that, but they're conscious. There's a lot of meditators.
I meditate. I meditate
you
daily.
meditate?
I meditate. I journal. I do the 5-minute gratitude journal every day. I do. Yeah, I work out almost every day. If it's walking my dog, or I mean, I think just sort of working backwards from that state of consciousness. I think that when you look at the DNA, and I'm in a number of masterminds and communities, and I would have 100%, I mean, without doing the level of research that you've done, agree that it is almost a way of life. And it's how do you build almost that level of dedication, commitment, and routine to every aspect of your life. And so building space with a practice like yoga or meditation, it creates that room for focus. Like if I start my day and I meditate at the start of my day, I set the tone for the day. I'm in control of my day. And one of my favorite quotes, and one that I'm just a huge believer in, is how you do anything is how you do everything. And
Interesting.
So when you have that level of commitment to go to yoga twice a day, like you do, it says so much about you as an individual, because if that's how you're choosing to spend your free time and that's what's important to you, then imagine the effectivity and the outputs that come when you're in your actual, happy place. I'm sure yoga is probably a happy place too, but the reality is it's all transferable skills that help amplify your output in life.
Oh, I think you're very right about this, that they do this consistently. Part of it is, although you are in the business as a one-person business, you're the vehicle for the business. And if you think about it, a food truck, if the food truck is in the shop, it can't sell the food. So I think solo entrepreneurs and people in these very small businesses realize that their health and wellness, including mental wellness, are really important. They sometimes learn this the hard way because they work themselves into the ground before they start adding the automation, outsourcing, and contracting, and get to the point of a nervous breakdown. And then they're like, oh, I need to do something differently. And they grow and learn. And then they pivot into improving their systems and processes in the business life. And they realize, I have to take care of myself. I need to meditate for 10 minutes a day, or I need to do yoga or run or lift weights or pray, or whatever it is for them personally that helps them stay centered and grounded, and think about what's important in life, like your gratitude journal. Why are you doing this business? Because there's a bigger why to it. Regardless of what the business is, it's your contribution to the world. It's supporting you and your family. It might be giving back to your customers. There's a lot of things that the business allows you to do, but only if you take care of yourself. And I think that's so important. The mastermind and coaching, if I remember correctly, it was about 50% are using that in my survey. I'll double check that for you later, but it wasn't all of them. I thought it would have been higher, But what I did find was that there are a lot of people that have informal things that they use instead, like a peer supporter or, online network.
Accountability partner.
Yeah. Or they're like on an active thread on Reddit, even sometimes. It doesn't matter what it is. They're getting inputs from other people that know this whole crazy entrepreneurial world and can be a sounding board, emotional support buddy, whatever it is. But we all need these things, but these are things that you might get in a company. If you worked in a big company, you'd have the person in the next cubicle. If it's your own business and everybody's spread out around the world, you might not have that as much. So it's important to create it for yourself. And I think these folks really do. They have big networks. And I think I mentioned this to you. A lot of them know each other independently of me. They seem to all meet each other somehow. And I think that's kind of interesting because they're in different fields and they don't necessarily travel to the same places. They just seem to cross paths, and probably a lot of it is online.
So I got a question for you, and it's not necessarily related to the book, but just on that topic, it's something I've been sort of hypothesizing for a little while now, and I'd love your input. So, you read often that the gap between the 1%ers and the rest of the world in terms of wealth distribution continues to be an even greater divide. The 1%ers continue to get more and more wealthy, and the rest of the world continues to struggle. And I'm not insinuating I'm part of the 1%ers necessarily. I don't think I am, but who knows? But the reality that's become very apparent to me through this entrepreneurial journey is that I'm not actively trying to work with and partner with people who are from a lower socioeconomic standpoint. And I'm not trying to create divides. I have a whole business that's focused on paying fair salaries in the Philippines and, paying sometimes north of 50% more than the average market rate. So I'm actively, not trying to work toward that. But what I'm finding is that as I meet incredible entrepreneurs and business owners, I gravitate toward them and I want to work with them because I believe in their output and their ability to generate value. And as a result, I want to partner with them. So, we're trying to partner now with a couple of, sort of heavy hitting businesses in joint ventures. And for me, it's got nothing to do with their status or their class or anything like that. It's really just the consideration that I know that what they're doing is fantastic. I really align with them from a strategic position, and just morally, I think that they're a great company and great people. But just wondering, in all these entrepreneurs that are sort of happening to meet each other, which I also feel tends to happen, like someone will connect me and I'm like, oh yeah, we met like online or at that event or whatever it was. Has anything like that come up in some of your conversations? Like, am I sort of like making too quick a call on something like this, or is this like, this feels to me natural? But anyway, I'm rambling here. Just curious to hear your thoughts.
I think definitely there's a lot of connections that happen. And when you set an intention, and tell your friends that I'd like to do X, that's a way of setting it in motion, right? And then they think of it that you wanted to support underrepresented entrepreneurs in your business. And when you're looking for a marketing agency and you tell them that, they'll remember an agency that fits that description. One of the interesting things about one-person businesses, I just wrote a post for this for Forbes. There was a new way that they crunched the numbers at the Census Bureau, and it only went up to 2017 when they had 40,000 non-employer firms breaking 1 million, but 6,900 are minority-owned firms and 5,100 are owned by women. So that's a pretty decent percentage. And I think it's an equal opportunity trend because it doesn't require as much access to capital as having a traditional startup. If we look at those numbers, it's really dismal in terms of who's raising capital. I hate to even cite the numbers because there's been so little progress, despite how smart people are in Silicon Valley. This seems to be the one problem they cannot solve. but they are working on it. But in the meantime, for all the people who don't want to wait another lifetime to start their business, you can do this by bootstrapping. And people who can get to 1 million can then create opportunities for other entrepreneurs. They can hire other agencies, to your point. They can support businesses that, based on their merit, deserve to win that contract. And to me, that's a very exciting trend, and one that I think will only continue, because the more people know about the trend, the more they'll realize it's a possibility for themselves. And it's like sports, right? Like with the 4-minute mile, nobody thought it could be done. Then the record gets broken, and now there's lots of people that have run a 4-minute mile. And I think same thing with $1 million one-person businesses. Sometimes people write to me and they say they saw one of the articles and it inspired them to get to 1 million. And it's somewhat of an arbitrary number, right? Because you are a business person, but in case somebody is new to business, bringing in 1 million in revenue is not 1 million in what you take home in profit. You have overhead and you have taxes. So you might be, based on what people have told me in these interviews, I would say most of them are bringing home between $200,000 and $400,000 a year in actual income that they can spend. And it depends on the industry a lot. Some of them are much more profitable than that, some of them less, but that's probably the average. So they're not, maybe that might be the top 1% in certain parts of the world. It wouldn't be in New York City. It would probably be like top 5%. But I don't think I believe in abundance. I don't think you're taking away from anybody by if you are in the top 1%. I would just like to see everybody in the top 1%. And I think it's possible that a lot of people who aren't earning what they would like could earn a lot more by starting their own business and really unleashing their true potential. When you think about it, there's a lot of artificial roadblocks in traditional jobs for people. There's been like the glass ceiling, and there's not equity, and a lot of other factors that are very hard to solve and could take a very long time to solve. But in this, there are no gatekeepers. Right? There's not a gatekeeper to the financing. There's not a gatekeeper as to whether you can actually start the business. These are very organic grassroots businesses, which is why, to me, it's actually the most exciting trend in business. It's the most empowering trend that there is.
Massively so. I think that for a lot of people, that roadblock is mental. Like, I think for anyone going off onto their own for the very first time, and I'll put my hand up and say it was terrifying. Can I really, even after, for me, 10 plus years of experience, like, can I really do this? Like, there's so many things that I don't know, and there's so many things that are totally unknown. But I think, like, as you continue to grow larger and larger businesses, there's always going to be plenty of things that you didn't know. And once you go through that experience enough times, the things that were once extremely terrifying and daunting are effectively something you don't even take a second look at. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that barrier, or that glass ceiling, or those opportunities, you just really have to put a plan together first and then take the plunge and see how it turns out. Because worst case scenario, you can always go and work for someone again. That doesn't go away. You've had more experience, worst case, and you had a failed business, but you tried.
Oh, I think you're right about that. I do think it's what I've seen when I've done events where the entrepreneurs from the book speak. I found that people actually tend to go up and talk to the person on the panel who is most similar to them, usually by age. And I think that really is a proxy for the stage of life somebody is in. And based on that, I would say that if you feel hesitation about it, it's good to try to talk to other people that you feel you have something in common with. Like if you're a mother and you're balancing raising young children with trying to start a business, talking to other people who are mothers or fathers who are dealing with the same thing might be more useful to you than talking to somebody who has a completely different life situation. than maybe someone who's 22 and is still living with their parents who are paying the rent. I mean, that's different than if you're trying
Jeez, I
to
miss
pay a
those
mortgage
days.
and raise kids. Yeah, so you'll learn some practical solutions for how to pull it off, regardless of whatever obstacles your personal life situation is throwing your way. I think it's good to get a breadth of knowledge, but if you don't have massive time for networking, that seems to be very inspiring to people, is just seeing other people similar to themselves doing it. And the good news is that there really are people in every demographic doing this. It's not confined to any one group.
Absolutely. I think that it's around you everywhere. You just need to know where to look. And I'm just looking at the time. I can't believe how quickly this hour has gone. I
I
feel
know we
like
have a lot to talk about.
we have tons
We
more
always
to
do.
talk. I know that we've only got a few minutes left here, but I've looked obviously through the book and had a solid read, and I think that just inside of it lays a lot of the insights and the information that you're sharing right now is peppered in there. So all the different types of businesses that you could potentially start, even areas when you get stuck, when the business growth flatlines. You've done Q&A sessions with businesses who have been through these issues before. I mean, I'd love you just, to highlight some of the key things that people will actually learn, because there's a lot of value in the book.
Sure. Well, you will learn how to identify what your unique pocket of genius is. The appendix has a lot of exercises that you can do. If you're not sure what business you could start, it will really get you thinking about what you uniquely can do, because it doesn't really matter what other people do. It matters what you can do. And it will teach you a little bit about how people have financed these businesses. It's really different for each person. Some people have saved money from a job. Other people have done it as a side hustle. Other people, have raised money. So you'll see the variety of different ways that people have pulled it off. You'll learn a lot about the tech tools that people are using. These are pretty low tech businesses, but they are using automation to some extent. You'll learn a lot about best practices for using contractors and outsourcing. It's a case study book, so it's told through stories. It's not a workbook. It's not linear. You'll learn through real people's life stories. But I think those are the things that people remember. It's funny because I've read so many, you can imagine being a book author, how many books you read yourself. And I find I always remember stories more than anything else. And I think people just do.
Yeah. I was lost in thought just listening to what you were saying in terms of like the appendices and what you can actually go through and where your unique skill set is. And yeah, I think I just totally drifted off into like, all these questions and wanting to do these exercises and
Starting a new business, right, Yoni?
yeah. That's actually, you're onto me, Elaine. That's exactly it. You've given me a great idea.
Oh, I'm glad. But the most important thing I learned from all of these people is showing up, because you will achieve nothing if you don't work on the business pretty much every day. You don't have to work on it 80 hours a week, but there's some benefit to consistency of practice. And it's something that I learned just from doing yoga. I also studied Taekwondo with my daughters, and have been doing that for probably almost 10 years at this point. And there's sort of a mystery to it, I think, with these practices where you try to do things. I remember this posture, the crow, if anyone does yoga, where you're like balancing on your arms, like kind of on your elbows. And it took me like 2 years. I would like fall on my face, or I couldn't do it. And I thought, oh, I need to go to the gym and do bench presses or something like that. And then it wasn't that at all. One day I just came and I did it. And I don't know why it was on that day. I just could do it. Or, in martial arts, you breaking wood, you just see it and your teacher holds up the wood and you're terrified. One day you can do it. I don't know why. I think it's just, you keep on practicing and then somehow you just learn it, but you will not learn it if you don't keep showing up and you don't allow yourself to experience that sort of mysterious surprise of when that day is going to come. And you will only show up and learn it if you choose the right business. for you, not a business other people think you should start, or not one that's the most practical one, but one that really generates your passion. If you're passionate about it, it will feel like play. Like you said, with your business, you'll love working on it, and you'll almost feel guilty because you can't believe people are paying you for it. And that will make you keep showing up. So it's important to do the work up front and really think about what you would like to do, and try things before you commit. Excuse me. And then you'll do the practice, and you'll get the results.
Such just sound words of advice there. Consistency is 100% key to, it's like, and I know that we've got to wrap up here in a second, but just thinking back as well, I think the consideration of like, when did you become an entrepreneur, and this whole notion of like entrepreneurs start young and go through this process. I was 30 when I probably started my first successful, legitimate business. And when people ask you that question, it's like, it's the first time you've ever done something in your life. But the reality is, like, your entire journey up until that point has been learning and finding your passions and your ability, your unique ability, and going through that learning on someone else's dollar until you get to that stage. I think there's a lot of value in that too. So to your point, that consistency and, finding what you uniquely bring to the table is paramount to actually being able to achieve anything. And so turning up every day is probably the easiest thing you can do to actually move into a position where you can actually see success.
Oh, definitely. And I think you'll know you're in that stage when you start having challenges, and you might have stress, but some part of you is saying, bring it on. And you feel like you can, like, whatever happens, you're going to figure out how to nail this. And there's sort of a joy in that. And I think that's where these people are. They've gotten the practice in, and they've seen all the different things that can happen and go wrong and go right. And they have the pattern matching, and they almost enjoy the puzzle of it and the challenge of it, and the emotional side of it too, the ups and downs. And I think that's the transition where you're really a true entrepreneur, where you're willing to go along for the ride and see where this takes you. It doesn't always take you to success, but ultimately I think it does, because you're learning all the things that you need. That's what I found. Some of these folks have had 4 or 5 businesses before the $1 million one-person business. So if your first one doesn't work, it doesn't mean you're not a great entrepreneur. It means you haven't found the right business for you.
Amen. Well, on that point, Elaine, I will, I'll let you finish off in just saying, what's the best way if someone listening in wants to reach out to you? I'm sure there's a good chance there might be some of these $1 million one-person entrepreneurs listening in. So how can they find you? What's the best way to get in contact? Do you want people to contact you?
Oh, I do. I love hearing from people who've listened to podcasts and read the book. I love hearing from entrepreneurs, because it makes me a better journalist to know what's on your mind. And they can write to me under my first and last name on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. I do write back, sometimes lengthy responses with lots of questions for you. And if you're one of these entrepreneurs, I'd love to hear from you. I'm always looking for more to profile. From my column on Forbes, readers seem to really love the new examples. I think this is an area where everybody's learning the best practices. So you'll be part of this whole living laboratory. And I can't wait to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure that we put that in the show notes and that they can actually get in contact with you. But Elaine, I just want to say thank you so much. I've loved every minute and feel like I've learned a lot in the hour that we spent. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to jump on.
Thank you so much, Yoni. And I look forward to writing about you for Forbes.
That'll be fun. That'll be the day. Thank you. And I'm excited for everyone to have a listen and get to hear. And also, obviously, buy the book, read it, check out what's going on, because there is such high quality value just peppered in everywhere. And yeah, I think when we hang up now, I might go back to doing some of those appendices.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I can't wait. Well, let me know what you think. And we actually need to schedule a time for our next call.
We can do that after this. Thanks again. And yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks so much, Yoni.